Fierce fighting dog rescues helpless baby deer. The outcome will make you cry. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves beneath heavy paws. Rex's body was battered, his dark fur matted with blood and dirt from the fight he had narrowly escaped. His breath came in ragged gasps as he limped through the underbrush, his mind racing but his body on the verge of collapse. For years, Rex had been a fighter, not by choice but by force. Trained to be aggressive, his life had been a cycle of brutal matches, chained cages, and the cruel voice of the man who called himself Rex's owner. But today, everything had changed. During transport after yet another harrowing fight, Rex had seized a moment of distraction and bolted. It was his only chance for freedom, and he had taken it, running as far and fast as his legs would carry him. Now deep in the woods, the sounds of pursuit had faded, leaving only the rustle of trees and the occasional call of a bird. But Rex didn't stop. Something inside him, a flicker of instinct long buried, urged him onward. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. After what felt like hours, Rex stumbled into a clearing. The sunlight filtering through the trees revealed a scene that made him freeze in his tracks. A small fawn was tangled in barbed wire, its slender legs kicking weakly as it tried to free itself. The wire had wrapped around its neck and torso, cutting into its soft fur and leaving streaks of blood. Its cries were faint but desperate, a heartbreaking sound that pierced the quiet of the forest. Rex's first instinct was to approach cautiously, his muscular frame lowering as he sniffed the air. The fawn's wide, terrified eyes locked onto him. It struggled harder against the wire, its cries growing more frantic. Rex hesitated, his powerful jaws parting slightly as he considered his next move. This was not a fight, this was something else entirely. A faint memory stirred in the back of his mind, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Slowly he stepped closer, his head low, and his movements deliberate. "It's okay," Rex seemed to convey through his body language, though he had no words to offer. "I won't hurt you." The fawn's struggles lessened as Rex came closer, though its body remained tense. Rex reached the edge of the barbed wire and sniffed at the tangled mess, his sharp nose taking in the metallic tang of blood and the earthy scent of fear. Carefully, he used his teeth to grasp a section of the wire, pulling it gently to create slack. The wire was sharp, and it bit into Rex's mouth as he worked, but he ignored the pain. His focus was entirely on the fawn, whose trembling body seemed to relax slightly with each passing moment. Inch by inch, Rex loosened the wire, his movements slow and methodical. After what felt like an eternity, the final strand of wire came free, and the fawn collapsed onto the ground, its legs splayed awkwardly beneath it. Rex stepped back, his chest heaving as he watched the small creature struggle to rise. "You're free now," Rex seemed to say, his head tilting slightly as he observed the fawn. But the fawn didn't move. Its legs were too weak, its body too drained from the ordeal. It let out a soft bleat, its eyes half closed as it lay in the grass. Rex lay down beside the fawn, his massive body forming a protective barrier between the vulnerable creature and the rest of the forest. Though exhaustion tugged at him, he kept his ears pricked, listening for any signs of danger. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, but nothing threatened them for the moment. As the hours passed, the fawn's breathing steadied, and it turned its head slightly to look at Rex. The dog's presence, once so intimidating, now seemed almost comforting. Rex let out a low, rumbling sound deep in his chest, a reassurance that he would stay. Night fell, and the clearing grew dark, the only light coming from the moon that peeked through the trees. Rex remained alert, his body a shield against the chill of the night. The fawn nestled closer to him, its small frame pressing against his side. For the first time in years, Rex felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with fighting or survival. In protecting the fawn, he felt a spark of the dog he had once been, long before cruelty had shaped him into something else. The next morning, the forest was bathed in golden light as the sun rose over the horizon. The fawn stirred, its legs twitching as it tried to stand. Rex rose to his feet, his body stiff from the night's vigil, but ready to help. He nudged the fawn gently with his nose, encouraging it to rise. After a few attempts, the fawn managed to stand on wobbly legs, its large eyes blinking in the sunlight. Rex stayed close, his presence steady and reassuring as the young deer took its first tentative steps. Together, They moved through the forest, Rex leading the way. He didn't know where the fawn's mother was or if she was even still alive, but he was determined to find a safe place. The fawn followed him closely, its trust in the dog growing with each step. Their journey was not without challenges. At one point, they encountered a small stream, its current swift and cold. The fawn hesitated at the water's edge, its legs trembling as it peered at the rushing water. Rex stepped into the stream first, the icy water swirling around his legs. He turned to look at the fawn, letting out a low growl that seemed to say, "You can do this." The fawn stepped hesitantly into the water, its hooves slipping on the smooth stones beneath the surface. Rex moved beside it, his sturdy frame providing support as they crossed together. On the other side, the fawn shook itself off, its confidence growing. As the sun climbed higher, Rex caught a scent on the wind that made him stop in his tracks. His ears perked up, and his body tensed. It was a human scent, familiar but unwelcome. He let out a low growl, his eyes scanning the trees. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Rex's former owner, his face twisted with anger as he spotted the dog. "There you are, you worthless mutt," the man snarled, heavy chains swinging from his hand. "You thought you could run from me?" The fawn froze, its small body trembling with fear as the man stepped closer. Rex positioned himself between the fawn and the man, his lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. The dog that had once fought for survival was now fighting for something far more important. "You think you can scare me?" the man taunted, raising the chain. But Rex didn't flinch. He let out a deep, resonant bark, his body a wall of muscle and determination. The man hesitated, realizing that Rex was no longer the frightened, submissive dog he had once been. There was something new in the dog's eyes, something fierce and unyielding. With a final growl, Rex lunged forward, not to attack but to drive the man back. The movement was enough to send the man stumbling, his confidence faltering. He turned and ran, disappearing into the trees. When the man was gone, Rex turned back to the fawn, who had pressed itself against a tree in fear. He let out a soft whine, his body language calming as he approached. The fawn blinked up at him, its fear giving way to trust once more. The two continued their journey, the bond between them stronger than ever. Rex's courage had saved them both, and as they moved through the forest, the dog carried himself with a quiet pride. The forest seemed quieter now, as if it had witnessed Rex's defiance and decided to offer a reprieve. The fawn walked closer to him, its trust in the massive dog growing with each step. Rex occasionally glanced back, ensuring the young deer was keeping pace. Though still trembling slightly, the fawn's legs were steadier, and it no longer hesitated at every noise. Rex, however, was alert. His former owner might have retreated for now, but Rex knew the man's cruelty too well to assume he wouldn't return. The thought made Rex growl softly under his breath, a promise to himself that he would protect the fawn at all costs. By mid-afternoon, they came upon a small glade where the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow on the forest floor. The fawn stopped, its large ears twitching as it sniffed the air. Rex paused as well, his sharp senses picking up something familiar, the faint scent of other deer. The fawn let out a tentative bleat, its small voice carrying through the glade. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the far side of the clearing, a larger figure emerged. It was a doe, her sleek body moving cautiously as she approached. Her eyes were wide and alert, flicking between the fawn and Rex. The fawn responded with a louder bleat, its legs moving forward shakily. The doe froze for a moment before bounding the rest of the way, nuzzling the fawn with her nose. The reunion was immediate and tender, the fawn pressing close to its mother as if to assure her that it was safe. Rex watched from a distance, his tail wagging slightly. For the first time in what felt like years, he felt a glimmer of peace. He had done it. The fawn was no longer alone. But as the doe turned her attention to Rex, her posture shifted. Her muscles tensed and her ears pinned back as she let out a sharp snort, warning him to stay away. Rex stepped back instinctively, lowering his head in a gesture of submission. He understood her fear. He was a predator in her eyes, a potential threat. The fawn, however, didn't hesitate. It turned and took a few steps toward Rex, its small body pressing against his side. The gesture seemed to confuse the doe, who watched the interaction with wary eyes. Rex stayed still, letting the fawn nuzzle him one last time before it returned to its mother. The doe eventually relaxed, nudging the fawn to follow her. Rex stayed where he was, his golden eyes watching as the pair disappeared into the forest. A part of him felt a pang of sadness, but was overshadowed by relief. The fawn was safe, and that was all that mattered. Rex lingered in the glade for a while, his body finally relaxing as the adrenaline of the day faded. He lay down in the soft grass, his ears twitching at the distant sound of the forest. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt free, not just from the physical chains of his former life, but from the fear and pain that had defined it. As the sun began to set, Rex rose to his feet. He didn't know where he would go next, but he trusted that his instincts would guide him. The forest was vast, and for the first time, it felt like a place of possibility rather than danger. Rex's journey took him deeper into the woods, where the trees grew taller and the air carried the scent of pine and earth. He followed a narrow trail that wound its way through the underbrush, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of food or water. Though his body was still battered from the fight he had escaped, his strength was slowly returning. As night fell, Rex found shelter beneath a fallen tree, its massive trunk providing cover from the cool evening air. He curled up in the soft moss, his body aching, but his mind surprisingly calm. He thought of the fawn and the way it had trusted him, despite the scars and ferocity that had once defined him. The memory brought a sense of warmth that lingered even as he drifted into sleep. The next morning, Rex awoke to the sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, coming from the direction of the trail. His ears perked up, and he rose slowly, his body tense as he scanned the area. A moment later, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a woman dressed in sturdy boots and a worn jacket, her face framed by loose strands of auburn hair. She carried a small backpack and a walking stick, her movements purposeful but unhurried. When she spotted Rex, she froze, her eyes widening in surprise. "Whoa," she said softly, holding up a hand. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you." Rex growled low in his throat, his body lowering defensively. But something about her tone gave him pause. It wasn't the sharp, commanding voice of his former owner. It was calm, almost soothing. The woman crouched a few feet away, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I'm here to help." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small piece of jerky, holding it out on the palm of her hand. Rex's nose twitched as the scent reached him, but he didn't move. The woman stayed where she was, her hands steady and her eyes kind. "I won't hurt you," she said again. "I promise." After what felt like an eternity, Rex took a tentative step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He sniffed the air cautiously before inching closer, his body tense but his hunger driving him forward. When he reached the woman, he took the jerky from her hand, his sharp teeth grazing her palm lightly. She didn't flinch, her expression softening as she watched him eat. "There you go," she said, her voice filled with relief. "That's a good boy." Rex stepped back, his tail swishing slightly as he regarded her. The woman reached out again, this time placing her hand on the ground in front of her. She didn't try to touch him, letting him make the next move. To her surprise, Rex stepped closer, his massive head lowering as he sniffed her hand. His golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. This human was different. She wasn't like the others he had known. The woman, whose name was Clara, spent the next few days gaining Rex's trust. She was a wildlife rescuer who had been patrolling the area for signs of injured animals. When she had come across Rex, she immediately recognized the scars and the wary look of a dog who had suffered at the hands of humans. Clara didn't rush the process, giving Rex the space he needed while providing food and water. Slowly but surely, Rex began to relax around her, his growls turning into soft rumbles and his body language growing less defensive. One evening, as they sat by a small fire Clara had built, Rex lay down beside her, his massive head resting on his paws. Clara reached out tentatively, her hand brushing against his fur. When Rex didn't pull away, she smiled. "You're a survivor," she said softly, "but you don't have to do it alone anymore." Over time, Rex's wounds healed, both physical and emotional. Clara took him back to her small cabin at the edge of the forest, where he learned to trust not just her but the quiet, gentle life she offered. He still carried the scars of his past, but they no longer defined him. One sunny afternoon, as Rex rested on the porch of Clara's cabin, he heard a familiar sound, the soft bleat of a fawn. His ears perked up, and he rose to his feet, his tail wagging as he spotted the fawn and its mother standing at the edge of the clearing. Clara stepped outside, her eyes widening in surprise as she saw the deer. "Friend of yours?" she asked, smiling. Rex trotted toward the fawn, his massive frame moving with surprising gentleness. The fawn nuzzled him briefly before stepping back, its mother watching closely, but no longer wary. It was a brief visit, but it spoke volumes about the bond they had formed. As the deer disappeared into the trees, Rex returned to Clara's side, his tail swishing contentedly. For the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace, free from fear, pain, and the chains of his past. And as Clara rested a hand on his head, Rex knew that he had found not just freedom but home. Rex adjusted quickly to life with Clara. For the first time in his existence, he experienced warmth, not just the physical comfort of a soft bed in Clara's cabin, but the emotional warmth of kindness. The days of brutal fights and chains began to fade into distant memories, replaced by long walks in the woods, bowls of hearty meals, and quiet evenings by the fire. Clara, who had seen her fair share of injured and mistreated animals, marveled at Rex's transformation. Though his scars told a story of violence and pain, his eyes, once filled with fear, now glowed with curiosity and even trust. Each day brought new milestones. The first time Rex allowed Clara to brush his fur, the first time he wagged his tail freely, and the first time he playfully nudged her hand for attention. "He's a remarkable dog," Clara said one evening, speaking to her friend Sarah, who had stopped by to drop off supplies. "Considering everything he's been through, he's got such a gentle soul." Sarah, a fellow wildlife rescuer, nodded as she watched Rex dozing by the fireplace. "It's amazing how resilient they can be," she replied. "All it takes is someone willing to show them a little love." Rex's days were peaceful, but the forest never let him forget the bonds he had forged during his escape. He often wandered to the edge of the clearing near Clara's cabin, his sharp ears twitching as he listened for familiar sounds. It was there, one crisp autumn morning, that he heard the soft bleat of a fawn. Rex's ears perked up, and he trotted toward the sound, his powerful legs carrying him effortlessly through the trees. When he reached the edge of the clearing, his tail began to wag as he spotted the fawn he had rescued standing beside its mother. The doe watched Rex closely, her posture cautious but not hostile. The fawn, however, bounded toward him with unrestrained joy, nuzzling his side as though greeting an old friend. Rex lowered his massive head, his golden eyes soft as he gently nudged the fawn in return. Clara, who had followed Rex into the clearing, stood at a distance, her breath catching at the sight. "So that's why you were so restless," she murmured. "You've been waiting for them." The visits from the deer became a regular occurrence. Every few days, the fawn and its mother would appear at the edge of the clearing, their presence a quiet reminder of the connection Rex had forged during his escape. Clara often watched from her porch, her heart swelling with pride as she saw Rex interact with the deer. "You're like a guardian to them," she said one evening as Rex returned from one of their visits, his tail swishing contentedly. "A protector." Rex seemed to understand. He nudged Clara's hand gently, his eyes meeting hers with a look that spoke of gratitude and loyalty. For all the pain he had endured, he had found something precious, something worth protecting. One chilly morning, as Clara prepared to take Rex on their usual walk through the forest, she noticed something unusual. The fawn and its mother were standing at the edge of the clearing, but their movements were tense, their ears swiveling as though listening for danger. "What's wrong?" Clara murmured, stepping outside. Rex, who had been lounging on the porch, immediately stood, his body tensing as he followed the doe's gaze. A low growl rumbled in his chest as his sharp nose picked up a scent, one he recognized all too well. Clara noticed the change in Rex's demeanor and knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her voice calm but concerned. Rex let out a bark, his gaze fixed on the trees. Clara followed his line of sight, her heart skipping a beat as she spotted movement in the shadows. A man stepped into the clearing, his face twisted into a scowl. Clara didn't need an introduction to know who he was. "That's him, isn't it?" she whispered, her hand resting on Rex's back. "The one who hurt you." Rex growled again, his body lowering into a defensive stance. The man, Rex's former owner, smirked as he approached, a heavy chain swinging from his hand. Well, the man sneered. "I've been looking for you, Mutt. You think you can just run away from me?" Clara straightened, her eyes narrowing. "This dog doesn't belong to you anymore," she said firmly, her voice steady. "You need to leave." The man chuckled darkly. "He's mine. You don't know what he's worth." He stepped closer, his gaze shifting to the deer. "And what do we have here?" A little family reunion. Clara's heart pounded as the man raised the chain, taking another step forward. Rex let out a deep, resonant bark, his golden eyes blazing with determination. He positioned himself between Clara and the man, his powerful frame radiating strength. The man hesitated, clearly taken aback by Rex's defiance. "You think you can scare me?" he snarled, raising the chain higher. But Rex didn't back down. He bared his teeth, a low growl rumbling from his chest as he took a step forward. What happened next was a blur of motion. The man swung the chain, but Rex was faster. He lunged, his powerful jaws snapping just inches from the man's arm. The man stumbled back, cursing as he realized he was outmatched. "Fine," he spat, retreating into the trees. "Keep the stupid mutt. He's not worth the trouble." As the man disappeared, Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around Rex's neck. "You did it," she whispered, her voice shaking with relief. "You stood up to him." Rex leaned into her embrace, his growl fading into a soft whine. The fawn and its mother approached cautiously, their tension easing as they realized the danger had passed. The fawn nuzzled Rex's side, its small body trembling slightly. Clara smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You're a hero, Rex," she said softly. "To all of us." In the days that followed, Rex seemed lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He spent more time playing with Clara, exploring the forest, and visiting the fawn and its mother. The scars of his past remained, but they no longer defined him. He was free, truly free. Clara, too, felt a sense of peace. She often marveled at how far Rex had come, from a battered fighter to a protector and friend. His journey had been one of pain and hardship, but had also been one of resilience, courage, and redemption. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara sat on the porch with Rex at her side. The fawn and its mother stood at the edge of the clearing, their silhouettes framed by the golden light. "You built something beautiful here," Clara said, resting a hand on Rex's head. "A connection that can't be broken." Rex let out a soft bark, his tail wagging as he watched the deer. In that moment, Clara knew that Rex's story wasn't just about survival. It was about the power of kindness, trust, and the bonds that could be forged even in the darkest of times. And as the stars began to fill the sky, Clara and Rex sat together, their hearts full of gratitude for the life they had found and the family they had created. The weeks after Rex's final confrontation with his former owner were transformative for both him and Clara. The quiet life in the forest had given Rex the stability and safety he had never known before. His days were filled with long walks through the woods, playful moments with Clara, and the occasional visits from the fawn and its mother. Each day, Rex grew more confident, his scars fading into the background as he embraced his new life. Clara, too, found joy in Rex's presence. She had rescued countless animals over the years, but Rex was special. He was a survivor in every sense of the word, and his courage and resilience inspired her daily. She began documenting his story, hoping to share it with others and raise awareness about the plight of dogs like Rex. "I want to write this down," Clara said one evening, sitting on the porch with her journal in hand. Rex lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws. "People need to know what you've been through, and how far you've come." Rex wagged his tail slightly, as if he understood. Clara smiled and began to write, her pen moving across the page as she recounted the events that had brought them together. One crisp autumn morning, Clara decided to take Rex to a nearby meadow she had discovered years ago. The meadow was a peaceful spot, surrounded by tall trees and filled with wildflowers. It was the perfect place for Rex to explore and stretch his legs. As they made their way through the forest, Rex walked beside Clara, his ears perked and his tail wagging. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment as she watched Rex trot ahead, his powerful frame moving with ease. When they reached the meadow, Rex froze, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Clara followed his gaze and spotted the fawn and its mother grazing near the edge of the clearing. The fawn let out a soft bleat when it saw Rex, bounding toward him with unrestrained joy. Clara laughed as Rex greeted the fawn, lowering his head to nuzzle the young deer. "Looks like someone missed you," she said, watching the interaction with a smile. The fawn's mother watched from a distance, her posture relaxed but watchful. Clara sat on a fallen log, pulling out her journal as Rex and the fawn played in the meadow. She began sketching the scene, her hand moving quickly as she tried to capture the bond between them. As the day went on, Clara noticed something unusual. The fawn seemed particularly attached to Rex, following him closely and mimicking his movements. When Rex stopped to sniff a patch of wildflowers, the fawn did the same. When Rex lay down in the grass, the fawn curled up beside him. "You're like a big brother to him," Clara said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "He looks up to you." Rex tilted his head, his golden eyes meeting Clara's. There was a depth in his gaze that she had come to recognize, a quiet wisdom born from experience. In that moment, Clara realized just how much Rex had changed. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a protector, a guide, and a friend. As the sun began to set, Clara packed up her belongings and called Rex to her side. The fawn and its mother lingered for a while, watching as Clara and Rex made their way back through the forest. Clara glanced over her shoulder, waving at the deer before they disappeared into the trees. "That was a good day," she said, resting a hand on Rex's back. "I think we needed that." Rex wagged his tail. His body relaxed as they walked side by side. The forest was quiet. The only sounds the rustle of leaves and the soft crunch of their footsteps. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt at peace. Back at the cabin, Clara prepared dinner while Rex lounged by the fireplace. She glanced at him occasionally, marveling at how far he had come. The dog who had once been battered and broken was now thriving, his spirit as strong as ever. "You've taught me so much," Clara said as she placed a bowl of food in front of him. "About resilience, about courage, and about the power of kindness." Rex looked up at her, his eyes filled with warmth. He nudged her hand gently before digging into his meal, his tail wagging softly. Clara smiled, her heart full of gratitude. That night, as Clara sat by the fire with Rex at her feet, she thought about the future. She knew their journey wasn't over, that there were still challenges ahead. But she also knew that they would face them together as a team. "You've come so far," she said softly, resting her hand on Rex's head. "And I'll be here every step of the way." Rex let out a contented sigh, his eyes closing as he drifted off to sleep. For the first time in his life, he was safe, loved, and truly at home. The days turned into weeks, and autumn began to give way to the chill of winter. Clara worked tirelessly to prepare her cabin for the colder months, stacking firewood and ensuring that the animals under her care would remain safe and warm. Rex was always by her side, constant and reassuring presence. Whether he was helping to carry small logs or simply keeping watch as she worked, his loyalty never wavered. The visits from the fawn and its mother continued, though they became less frequent as the forest grew quieter with the changing season. Each time the fawn appeared, it greeted Rex with the same unrestrained joy, bounding toward him as if no time had passed. The bond between them had become undeniable, a symbol of the trust and love that could exist between creatures of different worlds. One morning, as frost coated the ground in a shimmering blanket of white, Clara decided to take Rex on a longer walk through the forest. The air was crisp and cold, and the sun shone brightly through the bare branches, casting long shadows on the forest floor. As they walked, Clara noticed how at ease Rex had become in his new surroundings. His posture was relaxed, his tail wagging slightly as he sniffed the air and explored the trail ahead. It was a stark contrast to the tense, wary dog she had first met, a testament to how much he had healed, both physically and emotionally. "You've really settled in, haven't you?" Clara said, smiling as Rex paused to investigate a patch of frozen moss. "This forest feels like home now, doesn't it?" Rex looked back at her, his golden eyes soft and content. Clara felt a surge of warmth in her chest. She had always believed in the power of rescue and rehabilitation, but Rex's transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. He had not only survived his past, but had thrived in spite of it, becoming a symbol of hope and resilience. Their walk took them to a small, frozen pond nestled in a clearing. Clara knelt at the edge, brushing away the thin layer of snow to reveal the glassy surface beneath. Rex stood beside her, his reflection shimmering in the ice. "This was one of my favorite spots growing up," Clara said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "My dad used to bring me here in the winter. We'd skate on the ice and make snow angels in the clearing." She glanced at Rex, her smile softening. "I think he would have loved you, you know. He always had a soft spot for animals, especially the ones who needed a little extra care." Rex wagged his tail, his body leaning against her side as if to say he understood. Clara reached out to scratch behind his ears, her heart full of gratitude for the bond they shared. As they turned to head back to the cabin, Rex suddenly froze, his ears perking up. Clara followed his gaze, her eyes scanning the tree line for any signs of movement. The forest was still, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in a breeze. "What is it, boy?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. Rex let out a low growl, his body tensing as he stepped forward. Clara felt her pulse quicken as she strained to see what had caught his attention. After a moment, a shadow moved between the trees, a large figure, its movements deliberate and slow. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was, a buck, its antlers gleaming in the sunlight. The majestic creature stepped into the clearing, its dark eyes fixed on Rex and Clara. Rex didn't growl or bark. Instead, he stood still, his posture calm but alert. The buck sniffed the air, its ears flicking back and forth as it assessed the situation. Clara held her breath, unsure of what would happen next. Then, to her amazement, the buck lowered its head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement before turning and disappearing back into the forest. Clara exhaled slowly, her heart still racing. "That was incredible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like he knew you weren't a threat." Rex wagged his tail, his body relaxing as the tension left the clearing. Clara smiled, her admiration for Rex growing even deeper. He had a way of connecting with the world around him that was both humbling and inspiring. The encounter with the buck stayed with Clara as they returned to the cabin. She couldn't help but wonder about the connection Rex seemed to have with the animals in the forest. It was as though they recognized something in him, a strength, gentleness, a capacity for understanding that went beyond words. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara began to sketch in her journal. She had always been an artist at heart, and capturing the beauty of the forest and its inhabitants brought her a sense of peace. She sketched the buck, its antlers framing its regal face, and then added Rex beside it, his golden eyes filled with quiet wisdom. "You're part of this forest now," she said softly, glancing at Rex as he dozed by the fire. "You found your place here." As winter deepened, Clara and Rex fell into a comfortable routine. The days were spent exploring the forest, tending to the animals under Clara's care, and enjoying the quiet beauty of the season. Rex had become more than just a companion. He was a partner, a protector, and a reminder of the resilience that existed in all living things. One afternoon, as snow began to fall in delicate flakes, Clara heard a soft knock at the door. She opened it to find Sarah standing on the porch, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you two were doing," Sarah said, stepping inside and shaking the snow from her boots. Clara smiled, gesturing to Rex, who was lounging on his bed near the fire. "He's doing better than ever," she said. "I think he's finally found his peace." Sarah knelt beside Rex, scratching behind his ears. "You're a lucky boy," she said softly. "And you're a hero, too. I've heard about how you protected that fawn. Not many dogs could do what you did." Rex wagged his tail, his golden eyes meeting Sarah's. Clara watched the interaction with a sense of pride. Rex's story had touched so many lives, and she knew it was only the beginning. As the evening wore on, Clara and Sarah talked about their plans for the sanctuary. Clara had always dreamed of expanding her work, creating a place where animals like Rex could find refuge and healing. With Sarah's help, that dream was beginning to take shape. "We could start small," Sarah suggested, sipping a cup of tea. "Build a few more enclosures, take in a few more animals. With Rex's story, I'm sure we could get some support from the community." Clara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "I think you're right. Rex has shown me just how much these animals can teach us. It's time to give more of them a chance." Rex, who had been listening quietly, let out a soft bark, as if to voice his approval. Clara laughed, reaching out to scratch his head. "Looks like we've got our first supporter." That night, as Clara lay in bed, she thought about the journey that had brought Rex into her life. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every moment. Rex had taught her about resilience, about the power of trust, and about the beauty of finding one's place in the world. And as the snow fell softly outside, Clara knew that their story was far from over. Together, they would continue to build a life filled with hope, healing, and love, a life that honored the bonds they had forged and the lessons they had learned. The snowfall blanketed the forest in a thick layer of white, muffling the usual sounds of rustling leaves and snapping twigs. The quiet serenity of winter transformed the landscape into something almost magical. For Rex, it was a new experience. He had never known the joy of running through snow, his paws kicking up soft powder as he bounded ahead of Clara on their morning walks. Clara watched him with a smile, her breath visible in the cold air. Rex's transformation over the past few months had been nothing short of miraculous. He no longer carried the weight of his past, and his body, once scarred and battered, was now strong and healthy. But it was his spirit that amazed her the most, his ability to trust, to connect, to love, even after everything he had endured. As they made their way through the forest, Rex suddenly froze, his ears swiveling. Clara stopped, watching as he lifted his nose to sniff the air. A moment later, a familiar sound reached her ears, the soft bleat of the fawn. Clara's heart warmed as the fawn appeared at the edge of the trail, its small body blending almost perfectly with the snowy surroundings. The fawn hesitated for a moment before bounding toward Rex, who greeted it with a gentle nuzzle. The fawn's mother appeared soon after, her movements cautious but relaxed. She approached Clara and Rex slowly, her dark eyes watching them with a mix of curiosity and trust. Clara remained still, her breath catching as the doe stepped closer, lowering her head as if in acknowledgement. "You've earned their trust," Clara whispered to Rex, her voice filled with "They know you're one of them now." Rex wagged his tail, his golden eyes filled with quiet pride. He stayed close to the fawn and its mother as they continued through the forest, the group moving together as though they had always been a family. That evening, as Clara sat by the fire, she reflected on the bond Rex had formed with the deer. It was more than just a friendship, it was a testament to the power of compassion and the ability to heal. Rex had every reason to distrust the world, yet he had chosen to embrace it instead. Clara picked up her journal, flipping through the pages filled with sketches and notes about Rex's journey. She paused on a drawing of the fawn and its mother standing beside Rex, their postures mirroring the connection they shared. "This is your story," Clara said softly, glancing at Rex as he lay by the fire. "And it's one worth sharing." Over the next few weeks, Clara began to document Rex's journey in greater detail. She wrote about his rescue, his bond with the fawn, and the way he had transformed from a fighter to a protector. Her words poured out onto the pages, each one a tribute to the dog who had changed her life. Clara also began reaching out to local organizations and community members, sharing Rex's story in the hope of raising support for her sanctuary. She included photos of Rex, sketches of the forest, and anecdotes about the animals she had cared for over the years. The response was overwhelming. Letters and donations began pouring in, along with messages of encouragement from people who had been touched by Rex's story. "You're inspiring people, Rex," Clara said one morning, sitting on the porch with a pile of letters in her lap. "You're showing them what's possible." Rex wagged his tail, his eyes bright as he rested his head on Clara's knee. She scratched behind his ears, her heart full of gratitude for the journey they had shared. One particularly cold morning, Clara received a visit from Sarah, who arrived with a truckload of supplies for the sanctuary. As they unloaded the bags of food and building materials, Sarah glanced at Rex, who was playing in the snow with a fawn. "He looks so happy," Sarah said, her voice warm. "It's hard to believe he's the same dog you found all those months ago." Clara nodded, watching as Rex rolled onto his back, the fawn nudging him playfully. "He's come a long way," she said. "But he's not just a rescue anymore. He's the heart of this place." Sarah smiled. "I think you're right. And with all the support you've been getting, I think it's time to expand. We can create something really special here." Clara's eyes lit up. "I've been thinking the same thing. We could build more enclosures, take in more animals, give them all the chance that Rex had." The two women spent the rest of the day planning, sketching out ideas for the sanctuary's expansion. Rex stayed close, his presence a constant reminder of why their work mattered. The first step in expanding the sanctuary was building a new enclosure for injured deer and other wildlife that needed temporary care. Clara and Sarah worked tirelessly, enlisting the help of volunteers from the community. Rex was never far from Clara's side, his watchful eyes taking in every detail as the enclosure began to take shape. As the weeks passed, the sanctuary transformed. New enclosures were built, paths were cleared, and feeding stations were set up throughout the property. Clara marveled at how quickly her dream was becoming a reality, fueled by the support of people who believed in her mission. Rex, too, seemed to thrive in the bustling environment. He greeted visitors with a wagging tail, supervised the construction projects, and continued to watch over the fawn and its mother, who had taken up residence in one of the new enclosures. One afternoon, as Clara walked through the sanctuary with Rex, she paused to admire the progress they had made. The air was filled with the sounds of animals, birds chirping, deer grazing, and the occasional bark from a playful dog. It was a symphony of life, and Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she took it all in. "This is what we've been working for," she said, resting a hand on Rex's head. "A place where everyone can feel safe." Rex wagged his tail, his golden eyes scanning the sanctuary as if he understood. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. They had come so far, and she knew their journey was only just beginning. That evening, as the sun set over the sanctuary, Clara sat on the porch with Rex at her side. The fawn and its mother grazed nearby, their silhouettes framed by the golden light. Clara picked up her journal, flipping to the final pages where she had written a letter to Rex, a tribute to the dog who had changed everything. "Dear Rex," she read aloud, her voice soft. "You came into my life when you were broken, but you taught me that even the deepest wounds can heal. You've shown me the power of trust, the beauty of connection, and the strength it takes to rebuild. This sanctuary wouldn't exist without you, and neither would I. Thank you for being my friend, my partner, and my inspiration." As Clara closed the journal, Rex leaned against her, his head resting on her lap. She stroked his fur, her heart full of gratitude for the journey they had shared. And as the stars began to fill the sky, Clara and Rex sat together, their bond stronger than ever, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable connection between humans and animals. Winter gradually loosened its icy grip, and the forest began to stir with the first hints of spring. Snow melted into rivulets, feeding the streams and ponds that dotted the sanctuary, while tiny buds appeared on the trees, promising a lush canopy in the months to come. Clara watched the changing season with a sense of renewal, mirroring the transformation the sanctuary and Rex had undergone together. The expanded sanctuary was a success, with new animals arriving each week. Injured deer, orphaned raccoons, and even a few abandoned dogs found refuge within its boundaries. Volunteers came and went, each bringing their unique skills and energy to the sanctuary's mission. But through it all, Rex remained the heart of the sanctuary, a calming and protective presence that reassured both the animals and the people who cared for them. One particularly warm afternoon, Clara decided to take Rex to the far side of the sanctuary, where a new enclosure for rehabilitating wildlife was being finalized. The area was quiet, tucked away from the main activity of the sanctuary, and surrounded by dense trees that provided a natural barrier. As they walked along the path, Rex's ears perked up, and he let out a soft bark. Clara followed his gaze and spotted the fawn and its mother standing near the edge of the enclosure. The fawn had grown significantly over the past few months, its legs sturdy and its movements confident. It no longer resembled the fragile creature Rex had rescued, but its bond with him remained unshaken. The fawn approached Rex with the same enthusiasm as always, nuzzling his side before prancing back toward its mother. Clara laughed softly, leaning against the fence. "They're thriving because of you, Rex," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You gave them a second chance." Rex wagged his tail, his golden eyes following the fawn as it bounded through the enclosure. The doe watched from a distance, her posture relaxed but vigilant, as if she, too, understood the safety the sanctuary provided.